Hello, my name is Solis, and today I will be presenting on intervention methods for autism spectrum disorder through speech-language pathology. I am a communication sciences and disorders major, and this is the topic that I chose. So we'll start off by introducing the disorder at hand. So today we'll be talking about autism spectrum disorder. And ASD is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by deficits in social communication and social interaction, and the presence of restricted and repetitive behaviors. And so, interestingly enough, ASD is like one of the only neurodevelopmental disorders to be characterized by difficulties in communication. So this makes ASD very specialized to speech-language pathology, as they deal with a lot of these clients on a daily basis. ASD is a developmental disorder which displays itself on a spectrum in which individuals may be at levels ranging from mild to severe. And so this spectrum has led the disorder to be classified as a spectrum disorder, when previously it was just denoted as autism, but now it is known as autism spectrum disorder. Those afflicted with autism often have specialized hyperinterest in certain topics. And so, interestingly enough, when I was a senior in high school, I was able to work with populations that dealt with autism, and I got a lot of experience with these children. And for one, they were very interested in specific things such as like drawing, reading, writing, sports, and I made a couple friends over there, Rolando and Edgar. And Edgar could tell me all the statistics from the previous NFL games that happened that weekend, like from player to player. And Rolando was very interested in art, and so he could draw in the style of different artists, and he could do self-portraits or portraits of other people on the fly. And I always thought that was very interesting, and so that's what led me to studying speech pathology. And I really want to work with these populations as I move through my career. So we'll move on to the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder. And so 1 in every 54 children is affected by autism spectrum disorder. And prior to 1980, these numbers read as 1 in every 2,000 kids is affected by autism spectrum disorder. And that was because of a lack of screening and testing. And a lot of the times these children were not characterized as being autistic, but rather having learning disabilities or communication disabilities. And so this led to a lot of discourse within the community, and since then there has been an increase in testing, and so now we see this figure of 1 in every 54 children. And in this figure we have autism prevalence has increased 178% since the year 2000. And so here we can see this graph gradually goes up, and 1 in every 54 is the final metric. With increased screening, there's a greater caseload now, and more demand for innovation and specific treatment in specific cases is necessary in order to really bridge the gap between autism and therapy. So we move on to our treatment methods. So treatment and evidence-based practice is very important, because evidence-based practice is applying or translating research findings in our daily patient care practices and clinical decision making. So without evidence-based practice, there is no backbone for a specific research treatment. So in speech-language pathology, EBP is held to be the highest standard and most trustworthy denotation of treatment. And so today we'll be looking at 3 different evidence-based practices for treatment in ASD. And for a treatment to be considered by an SLP, it must first stand the test of review, data, and research. And these are the 3 metrics in which speech pathologists look for treatment, assessment, or screening. And so the 3 options that we'll be looking at today are peer-mediated intervention, parent-mediated intervention, and augmentative and alternative communication devices, or AAC. And so through peer-mediated intervention, we see intervention in which peers are trained and participate with clinician and client to provide support for the activity at hand. In parent-mediated intervention, parents of the client are trained and are included within the treatment activities. This can be in the clinical or home setting. And in AAC, we have devices that are utilized by the client to support/enhance communication that already exists. These devices can be lower high-tech, but serve the same purpose of augmenting or providing alternative communication methods. So through peer-mediated intervention, this will be the first option that we have in the 3. Peer-mediated intervention seeks to be a method of modeling in which a client will imitate or follow the lead of their peers. And so the peers will either be brought into the clinical setting or the classroom setting, and they'll kind of provide support through modeling for the client. The peers will be trained and utilized within therapy sessions to model communication or the activities at hand. Social interaction with peers who model proper behavior procedure can be greatly beneficial to the client. So one issue that we see with autism spectrum disorder is the social interaction aspect, as these children are often and so the reinforcement of social interaction for those with ASD is very crucial to their development, as their social skills are at a loss most of the time with ASD. And training of these peers can be difficult, as participating in such a specific manner is difficult to follow for elementary level students. These children may fall off task, or they may be distracting to the client, especially if they're friends or if they don't have a specific interest in the activity at hand. And then we have parent-mediated intervention. And so much like peer-mediated intervention, the clinician seeks to bring in familiar faces into the clinical setting and then reinforce the activities utilized in therapy at home or at the grocery store or in school. And so parent-mediated intervention seeks to broaden the horizons in a sense. This method of intervention is flexible and the key to reinforcing clinical strategies in a variety of settings, as I mentioned before. These settings can be anywhere, and so the parents will typically utilize their knowledge and pre-existing training from the clinician in order to reinforce it with their child. However, the intensity of parent-mediated intervention can vary on a case-to-case basis, and so some parents may be overbearing and reinforce these practices too many times, and the children may feel the sense of fatigue, or the parent may not be as invested as they should be into the intervention, and they may not utilize the proper intervention strategies, or they may not do it at all. Now we have augmentative and alternative communication devices. And so with AAC, we see a support to pre-existing communication skills, or in some cases, the child may not be expressive at all, and so they may be nonverbal, and so they may not be able to express any language whatsoever. And so AAC seeks to reinforce this, and they may use a picture chart as pictured on the left, or they may use a higher tech device that the child may click or type messages into, and it will be produced through an electronic speaker as this reinforces their communication. So yeah, these devices vary in terms of technology. They may just be a piece of paper with figures or specific words or emotions that the client may not be able to express on a daily basis. And they're integrated into the classroom setting by the SLP and assist in building a broader range of communication abilities for the client. So if they're not able to express their feelings or thoughts or ideas, these AAC devices seek to enhance that. However, some of the higher tech AAC devices may be too expensive or complicated for a client to utilize to their greatest potential. So with the most advanced AAC devices, we see devices such as the late Stephen Hawking utilized, in which he would breathe into a tube and it would produce typed out words that would be then displayed through a speaker, and the speaker would say the words for him. And so these devices were obviously very expensive, in the millions of dollar range. But the devices that we see on a client basis, we see some speakers that cost in the thousands, and insurance may not always cover them. And so these may not be accessible to every nonverbal client that we see. And so we have to ensure that these devices and methods of intervention are accessible to the client. So in conclusion, we have a broad range of methods for intervention through evidence-based practice. And these methods must be accessible, flexible, and cost-effective. These are the three criterion we take when discussing the proper intervention method for a client, especially as these clients are unique and they need a specialized method of intervention in order to be successful. And every year, hundreds of journals are published on ASD intervention as more cases arise and the caseload becomes even greater. And they all seek to meet the same requirements as listed above: accessible, flexible, and cost-effective. And for my recommendation, I recommend parent-mediated intervention as it meets the criteria necessary for productive intervention method. It's accessible within the home, it is cost effective, it costs the parent nothing to be trained, it costs the parent nothing to reinforce these ideas on a daily basis, and it is flexible in the sense that a parent may find specific times in order to reinforce these ideas with the client, or the parent may be able to utilize familiar objects or ideas with the child. Let's just say they play catch, and when they play catch, they're able to discuss their practice methods for language or communication deficits. So these are just some of my references, but other than that, that is my presentation on intervention methods for autism spectrum disorder through speech language pathology. Thank you.